Okay. Yep. Hold on. I'm going to turn the sound up. Oh, wrong one. See again. Zoom. There we go.
Perfect. Okay.
All right. Now we are good. Okay. So you've been in one of ours before, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we don't have to go through these, the housekeeping and the introductions. So we can just dive right in.
Okay. So, tantrums. So I'm sorry, Lindsay, how old are your children?
My daughter will be 3 next week, so she's moving on, but she'll be 3 next week. And my son is 18 months.
Okay. All right. So I have a daughter who's almost 18 months. So a lot of this I have been practicing at home because I always like to practice everything before I come to the table with you all. And it's been interesting. So a tantrum. So I put the definition here. I just think it feels good to hear what it is, because when we talk about tantrums, they always come off as so negative and almost like, what are you doing wrong as a parent because your child's having a temper tantrum? But really, if you look at the definition, an uncontrolled outburst of anger, frustration, typically in a young child, well, that's not crazy, nor is that anything to do with, there's a lot of things us parents can intervene in, but this is just something that naturally happens with all children. So most common ages is from ages 1 to 3. So Lindsay, you're probably in the thick of it on both ends. If it goes over to like 3.5, 4, and it's really unmanageable, then it's best to talk to the pediatrician, because that's a good sign that maybe there's some other behavioral health interventions that are needed. There's multiple ways that a tantrum can happen. So crying, screaming, throwing themselves on the ground, refusing to get up or engage with anyone, thrashing, throwing objects, hitting or slapping, head banging, running, or giving the silent treatment. But I think the majority of us can say that our children don't give the silent treatment during a tantrum.
That's usually resolved for teenage tantrums.
Yeah.
I'm in the thick of those right now.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I would love a silent tantrum.
I was literally just about to say, I think all of us parents with younger kids would easily take a silent treatment.
Silent treatment over anything else. Yeah.
So in ways temper tantrums can start, or what looks like a temper tantrum. So if the child doesn't get their way, if a child's trying to communicate but isn't being understood. So in a way, that's not really a temper tantrum. That is an issue with communication, which ages 1 to 3, that's majority of the issues that when they're frustrated is communication. When a child becomes jealous of what's happening with their sibling or friend, so they're not getting the attention that they want, like they want more attention. If a daily routine has been set up and that's been changed, whether it was suddenly or is a permanent change, that can cause a lot of new temper tantrums. When a child's being asked to stop or leave an activity that they're enjoying, like leaving the park, cleaning up your toys, and when a child is tired. But I put that in the same category as the communication, because yes, what they're doing looks like a tantrum, but it's actually an external thing that is affecting them. It's not just their mood, it's that they're tired.
Actually, I found something earlier that I'm going to pull over, see if I can. I'm working with double screens, so I'm going to pull it over here and show you. I'm going to have to see if I can share my screen again. Okay, so can you see this, Lindsay?
Yes.
Tantrum versus meltdown.
Yep.
So I was looking up something for somebody else this morning, and I saw this and it made me think of this afternoon. So we use these words interchangeably, but tantrums and meltdowns are two different things. So your tantrum is when they're trying to access something or communicate something, a toy, a book, an activity, attention, or they're trying to escape something that they do not want to do, changing activities, example. And meltdowns they're not intentional. It's when they've lost control of their behavior. So usually that happens when they're tired, or they're overwhelmed, or they're hungry, and they don't know how to communicate that. So this is the thing that and we'll talk about this a little bit later. This right here is the thing that really made it stand out to me, is that a tantrum, if you get the desired outcome, the tantrum is going to very generally quickly end.
Right.
If they're tantruming because they want a toy and they end up getting the toy,
right,
the tantrum's going to be over. Or if a parent gives in and says, okay, well, you can continue to play, it's going to be over. But a meltdown, even if you think, oh, he's tantruming because of this toy, and you give him the toy and the meltdown is still continuing, that's when you kind of are like, okay, there's something else going on. Might be tired, might be hungry, might be overwhelmed, so I really liked this little blurb. I was like, this really made it kind of even more clear. So all right, so I'm going to close that. Oops, let me share it again so we can see. Perfect. All right, can you see this screen again now? Oops, the blue screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
So since you're the only one, we don't want to put extra pressure on you, but do you want to share any like common tantrums that you struggle with at home, or share a certain tantrum or anything like that?
So both of them pretty much just fall to the ground and start crying. Now my son, though, he will like go forward and like bang his head on the ground, and I'm like, okay, you need to stop it. He's got a little mark on his head right now. We went to the pediatrician, and I was like, ooh, he fell. He was fine, and then my daughter, looks like this girl is like rolling all over the place. She does the same thing. It's obnoxious. And she's like a big 3-year-old. Like, she's like the biggest one in her class. And I'm like, girl, I need you to calm down because you're going to hurt yourself, your brother. It's painful.
Is there anything that normally gets them going? If one gets going, the other one gets going, anything like that?
A lot. So my daughter does not like when my son touches her sometimes. Like when we're eating, they sit next to each other. She's in the chair, he's in the high chair, but they're both at the table. And if he like tries to touch her, she's like, Lincoln touching me, and she like loses it. I'm like, it's fine. Like, calm down. Or if he pushes her sometimes, like if they both want to sit in the same little toy chair, she like loses it too. It's pretty much whenever her brother's trying to do something that she's doing, which is all the time.
Yeah, that's pretty common.
Yeah, very common. That's a huge reason of tantrum.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Also when they're tired, but that's more of the meltdown thing, I believe.
Yeah. Once you kind of think about like the difference, you can kind of start to think, learn like, okay, this is really a tantrum and I need to address it. The meltdown is probably the issue of a basic need not being met that they need right then. And so it's different. You don't want to really discipline if it's a basic need that needs to be met. But if it's just a tantrum, then, there's different ways to deal with that. So here like tips, tricks, and techniques. Probably the most difficult thing as a parent when you're frustrated is to remain calm, but you really got to remain calm. Because if you're frustrated and you actually like raise your voice or show that frustration, then it's just going to escalate things. And then you're in a power struggle and you don't want that.
And even if that means that you have to, if you just step out of the room and let them scream, or even if you're in public, you just give it a second, take a deep breath and let them scream. Screaming and all that is not going to hurt them. And so being able to regain yourself and then come back with a little bit more clear of a head.
It's
really
and
as kiddos grow, it's okay to say, mommy needs a break. Mommy's angry. Mommy will be right back.
I'm sorry, Lindsay, what were you trying to say?
I think I have a little bit of a delay. I was just going to say, when they're both going at it is really hard for me to stay calm because I'm like, one wants picked up, the other one just like runs away and I'm falling down. I'm like, okay. It's really hard for me not to curse too.
That's what I was going to, that's what I was going to say to you is especially remaining calm when you have two. So whether it's multiples or they're close in age, that is very difficult because normally it's not one tantrum, it's two. And even if it's one, then the other child still wants care and love too. So it's very, very difficult. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult.
So it's really, really good to just try to be as consistent as possible with your daily routine, because then that cuts down on the tantrums. Stick to it as much as possible, including nap time and bedtime, because we all have meltdowns when we're tired. So to try to avoid that if possible will help. Kind of planning ahead with your schedule, running errands when you know they're not going to be hungry or tired if you can. Try to pack small things to occupy your child, a snack or a toy, something that maybe even is a special toy that only comes out when you're running errands. So that's not something that they play with all the time to try to keep them occupied.
So for example, with my little one, the 18-month-old, she gets a passy at bedtime. And then other than that, it's a no passy zone all the time. So when a passy comes out and it's not bedtime, just her eyes light up like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. So I always keep a passy with me when we're out, because if she starts to act silly or, do her own thing, if I pull up that passy, it normally gives me about 20 to 30 minutes of like being able to wrap up. And then food. If your child, of course, like if there isn't any medical or health issue, food with these little kids is such a high motivation. And so I always have specials like goldfish. She never has them at home, but when we're out in public, she'll have goldfish and she thinks it's like the coolest thing in the world. And that just kind of helps you buy some time, as well as, especially out in public, as well as like you being able to get them up and get them together and out the door.
Yeah, especially having two so close in age. So, and it's hard because you're running errands with both of them. One's probably going to be hungry. They're not always going to be hungry and tired at the same time. So, if you can, did you need to say something, Lindsay?
I was just going to say, we do try to keep a routine as far as like bedtime routine with eat, brush your teeth, get your pajamas on, take a bath if we're going to take a bath at night. And my daughter's like, if we don't brush her teeth and let her floss, she loses it. I'm like, fine, floss your teeth again for the third time. Cool.
She's going to be an up and coming dentist, it sounds like.
Probably.
Right. Okay, so when you can, let them make the choices, especially with Liberty, because she's a little bit older. But even Lincoln at 18 months can start to make certain choices. Try to avoid saying no to everything. Instead of saying no, have in your head, okay, it's chilly outside, so they have to wear a shirt with sleeves. Instead of making clothing a battle, I'm going to say, do you want to wear your red shirt or your blue shirt? Let them make the choices. If you have two different fruits, let your kiddos make the choices. Or with an activity, would you like to do this? Would you like to read a book or build the tower? So that tends to cut down on the battles, because kids from 1 to 3, they're learning how to be independent. They want to make their own choices. So when you can, let them make those choices that are appropriate and agreeable with what you have in mind for the day. If you see that we've got some good behavior going on, if you see that, oh my gosh, Liberty let Lincoln play with the blocks when she was playing with the blocks, to say that.
That said it last time.
Okay, it didn't. Okay. So if you see Liberty's letting Lincoln play with the same toy as her and she's not throwing a fit, get really excited. Just say, oh my gosh, I love when you let Lincoln play with you. You guys are playing the blocks and you gave Lincoln a block. Good job. I'm so proud of you. And do the same when they follow the directions that you want them to do. And the more praise for the good behavior and the extra attention for good behavior, the more they want to do that good behavior and not the negative behavior that you don't want to see.
And like we talked about in the discipline, as a parent who doesn't use a stern voice much, I really use my facial expressions a lot that she now at 18 months is really starting to get in on. So not only do I tell her like, oh, good job, I'm so proud of you, but like my eyes get really big. I have a really big smile, even if I'm not like that excited about it. Cause it's like, oh, good job. You put a crayon away, but we're working on that. So, oh my gosh, good job. You put a crayon away, because I'm praising. I want that behavior. And you don't have, that's giving them an emotional reward instead of having to give a tangible reward.
Right. And you always have the emotional reward handy.
Yes.
Whereas you don't always have something tangible handy. And you don't want your children to think that every good behavior that they do gets a tangible reward. You want them to start learning and teaching them that intrinsic motivations, that feeling good about themselves because they did something that they were supposed to, is what's important.
Please excuse the interruption. I just wanted to remind everyone that at 1:45 we will be having a fire drill in case you need to get your kids up from a nap. Thank you.
We've still got some time. We've got some time for you, Lindsay. Okay, so avoid situations that are likely to trigger tantrums. So, if you give your child toys that are way too difficult, they're going to get frustrated. If they beg for toys or treats when you shop, steer clear of those areas if you can, that you know of with those temptations. If sometimes I have seen parents, if their child acts up in restaurants, they don't go to restaurants right away until they can teach their child to sit at a table more for a longer period of time.
And so actually with that last one, I think it's so important to also remember that when else in our children's lives are they able to sit for 45 minutes and basically just play with whatever's in front of them? Like never, right?
Never.
They're young. They're constantly running around. So the fact that we take them to restaurants and then we're upset that they can't sit for 45 minutes is really an unrealistic expectation for them.
Mm-hmm.
So the quicker service is so great. Even maybe not waiting until your child can do like a whole meal, but just doing little blocks, little chunks. We go out for an appetizer, or we go out somewhere that's really quick and we know it's quick and we're in and out of the door in 25 minutes, something along those lines. But the restaurant thing, we just need to set realistic expectations for our little ones.
Right. And distraction or bribe. Bribe is such a hot topic, hot button word.
It's like negative word.
It has a negative connotation, but it's really not always a negative connotation. So if you're out in public, you need to speed things along. It's someplace you have to go, like the doctor. On a rare occasion, using bribes or bargaining with your kiddo is really okay. Distractions are always okay. If they're frustrated with a toy and you say, that's okay. The toy needs to take a nap. Let's play with this toy, kind of distracting them. You can use that as much as you need to. But if you have to go to the doctor using the bargaining, first we're going to do this. We'll use that first then language, but say we're going to go to the doctor with mom and then we're going to go have ice cream. Like it's okay to use that as a bribe.
Now Lincoln would not understand that because that's way too high of comprehension for him. So you might need a more tangible bribe that can be right in the moment.
Right.
But
Liberty understand that.
Yeah, would definitely understand it.
But you can also,
have something in your back pocket.
My daughter used to love those suckers. What are those? The cheap ones that we get, the dum-dum suckers. Yeah. And I was never, candy and stuff doesn't bother me, but the dum-dum suckers I used to, because she loved them so much, I used to save them, and that was always my bribe. Like
Smart.
if I was at the doctor for myself, not for her, because then there's more interaction, you know, with her and with the doctor. But if I had to take her with me, and it was like, all right, we're gonna sit you down, and here's the sucker. Like I'll clean up the mess later, and it worked.
Yeah, that's nice.
So, but you know, again, those quick things that you can offer that bribe right here, you know, and get it before they start to do that whole meltdown. That's like the key, because you're like, okay, you start to see that wiggling, you know, okay, it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
And then say, oh, you're sitting so nicely here, you know, before that meltdown happens, you know, do that quick praise, find something to praise and give them something to distract or bribe them. So any questions, Lindsay, before we move on?
No, I was just going to say, oh, sorry, my work phone just rang. I was just going to say, my daughter's big about parks. And so if we're going to go somewhere, I'm like, we will go out to a park if it's a nice day after we do this. And she's like an angel the entire time.
Beautiful.
Because she's like, I'm going to a park.
Language.
Yeah.
That's really at that point, not a bribe. Because that's the first then language.
Right, because you're doing if and then.
Right.
That's actually a great concept for her
to start learning, because they do that in school.
Yeah. And it's a very great outdoor activity. So it provides her probably with exercise that makes her a little bit more tired. Like that's I'm glad she's really into that.
Beautiful.
Literally every park we drive past, me like that park. Me like that park. We've never been there, but she likes everything.
But we like it.
Yeah.
My kids used to talk about parks by the feature of the park. You know, like the park in Westland there, where City Hall used to be, there on Ford Road in Central City. My kids call that the Rocket Park because of the big, Oh, so they even now they call it, because I mean, even though they're in high school, they don't know that it's Tatton Park. You know, they're like the Rocket Park. You know,
that's so funny.
So I loved it when they did that. All right, next.
All right, so now a couple different ways of
options.
Yeah, different options to handle when you're having a tantrum. So there's the most popular one, the most tried one, which is a timeout. There's a few components to a timeout that is more likely to make it successful. So where your timeout location is very important. You want to make sure that it's in a boring place. It's not facing the TV. I personally like facing the wall because nothing gets more boring than the wall. As you know, with the 18-month-old, the timeout works for about 2 to 5 seconds, but I still try it. You want to think about giving them, the timeouts are 1 minute for every year they are. So Liberty would be 3 minutes, but Lincoln would be 1 minute.
But you also need to consider their developmental level too.
Correct. Yep.
Because we do have children that do have even like very severe delays, and maybe they're 5, but they have their mind works like a 1-year-old. You don't want to do 5 minutes because they just can't handle that. They're not there. So, you can adjust the minutes, and how long you think they need to sit. I would never go over their age.
Yeah.
But you can always adjust it and make it shorter.
Right. Another thing is that if they get up and start to wander, that you direct them back to their timeout spot until the time is over. The biggest thing that I don't have on here, but is so important, is with timeouts is using communication. So when you put your child in timeout, you say, okay, we're going to go in timeout because Liberty, you hit Lincoln and hitting is not nice. They sit in timeout. If she goes to wander, bring her back and saying, no, Liberty, you have 2 minutes left in your timeout, and just continue to redirect. Try to keep calm. Try not to be frustrated, even if you have to redirect her 50 times in 3 minutes. Just try to keep chatting with her and being calm. And then once they have calmed down, this is what I feel is the most important thing in regards to how our children are going to behave in the future. It's so important to have a debrief with them. right? Like just like you and your partner, I'm guessing, or a family member have debriefed about a really big fight before. Technically it's not a fight because it's your child. A temper tantrum to them is like a fight. So debriefing and saying, hey, like, was not okay. You can ask them, like, do you want to tell me why you did that? If they're at the age, like Liberty would be great, whereas Lincoln probably it wouldn't be ready for that. And because that shows them that we can do something bad, but still have a good conversation and learn from it. Or we can be in a fight, but still be able to come together and talk about it. So these are really big lifelong things that we're starting at a really young age. Mm-hmm. Using timeouts too much normally will not make timeouts better at all. If anything, it's going to make them worse. So if a tantrum is happening because they want attention or because they were told to do something they don't want to do, the best way to handle that normally is just by ignoring it. It reduces the behavior. A lot of times, any reaction to children during a temper tantrum is attention that they want. So even bad reactions. So if you're like, stop yelling, you're still giving them that reward. So just completely ignoring it. It's the same thing as if your child is doing something that you don't want them to do. Like, for example, let's say, like my daughter likes to come into the kitchen and chuck shoes. That's her new thing. She loves shoes and she likes to throw them everywhere. And I tell her 2 times to not do that. If she continues to do it, I completely ignore her. As long as your child is safe, like, so maybe not standing on a couch, not standing on a chair, but as long as your child is safe, it's completely fine to completely ignore them because they are going to get bored with that very quickly because we don't have mom or dad's attention anymore. Just like I said, on safety issues, those are the few times that you have to really hold your ground. So standing, having them sit on the couch, having them sit on a chair is so important. And those are things that you do not budge on. And then another idea about the timeout, this is a little bit better for when they're older, like 5+, is giving them some autonomy of how the timeout's going to go. So talk to them about, where do you want your calm down area to be? Maybe changing it from a timeout to a calm down area. Asking them, how much time do you think you should be in timeout? Here's what I think. What do you think? So creating more of a conversation, again, that empowers them to be better adults. That empowers them to, when they're upset, actually talk it through and to give input and to feel like they have some control, which is a big thing for kids. Let's see.
I would also, especially, actually, I was just talking to a parent about this earlier. For the kiddos, especially that kind of like tend to throw themselves and stuff, as long as they're in a safe place, like, you may have to move them to a place where they can actually do that safely. Mm-hmm. If you have a place, if you decide to do like a calm down area that has like pillows or whatever, as long as you know, and you can still have that visual, they're in your visual line of sight so that they're being safe. Sometimes just letting them do it a little bit might actually like lessen that incidence, because they're like, oh, this doesn't feel good, I don't want to do that. As long as they're not like really physically hurting themselves. If you have to, in order to prevent them from hurting themselves, especially with the younger children, like Lincoln's age, you can sit with them nicely as their parent. You can hold them on your lap and say, we don't hit, we need to be safe, and just kind of very short, don't engage in a long conversation because they're not listening. Right. Just short, that's not safe. Those type of words. We don't hit. We don't throw, but sometimes just as long as they're being safe, just letting them, fall out, as we say, is actually better than trying to like control the entire thing. And then down here where we talked about staying in the room, I had a parent earlier say that her husband wanted, because he is a headbanger, when he's mad, he wanted to have their child do if he had a tantrum in his bed, and she doesn't agree with that because that's his bed, and she didn't want the negative connotation because her child is actually a good sleeper. And for some kids, it's fine to do that the quiet space can be their bed, can be their room, but for some kids it doesn't work. It just depends on your family, your situation. A bed is a safe place to kind of, throw a tantrum and bang your head. But, if the child you think your child might have a negative connotation and not like his bed because you're putting him there for a tantrum, then, don't do that.
So, and to go back, again, with having an 18-month-old. So for our little ones, like I said, the sitting in the timeout thing is so hard. And honestly, 1 minute is doesn't really help them because it's such a short period of time. Piggybacking on what April has said, a lot of times, as long as my little one is in a safe place, and normally I let this happen at home because ideally I don't want her to continue to throw a temper tantrum out in public and roll all on the ground. But if we are at home and she throws a temper tantrum, I really just let it play out. The only things I make sure I do is I remove whatever it was that I was asking her to stop doing or to stop playing with. So let's say it was you had to stop playing with your doll because we're going to bed and then she has a temper tantrum, not a meltdown, because let's just say she's not tired. I would remove that doll. Or if it's in front of the TV, I would turn off the TV. And I always put myself in another room where I still can see her, but I'm not giving any type of attention towards it. I let her play out however long she needs. And then I make sure that I'm at her eye level when she's done. So I normally sit down on the ground and she'll normally come over to me. And even though she probably doesn't understand the majority of what I'm saying, I will very lightly debrief with her and say, I'm sorry you were so upset. I never like to see you that upset, but we have to listen to rules. Just starting that narrative with her. And it honestly, if you start it young with your child, it helps us as parents to then be more comfortable with it once they start talking back to us.
Yes. And then I wanted to touch a little bit on the 2-child thing. I had 2 children 3 years apart. And it's difficult in public. And I will tell you that I can count on one hand how many times I did have to leave a store because both of them were, getting upset. But it was a very small amount. So what I would do if we were out in public and for either of them, if we were separate or together, if somebody started getting upset, if I had to leave a basket full of, I tried to prevent it going in, like, this is what we're going to do. Here's a toy you can play with, that type of thing. But if it didn't work, then if I had to leave a basket full of food, I would find an employee and say, I'm really sorry, we're having a tantrum. We have to leave. And most employers are like, totally understand. They'd rather have you leave with your screaming child than stand there.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and then we would go out to the car and I would do kind of like an improvised timeout once they understood is that, okay, we're going to sit in the car, but we're not going anywhere until you calm down. So I would either sit in the car with them, or if it was relatively nice, I would roll down the windows and I would stand outside of the car. If it was cold, I would sit in the car. If it was nice, I would roll down all the windows, all 4 windows, and I would stand right next to the car with them buckled in their seats. And thankfully I had children that never tried to get out of their seats. I was very lucky.
And the air would be on if it was like a 90-degree day.
Right.
I just want to put that.
Absolutely. Yes. So that I was always within eyesight. I was always standing there. And then when they calmed down, I would get in the car and I would say, that behavior was not nice. We don't scream in the store, et cetera. Now at home, if I had both of them and they were going at each other or whatever, I would completely separate them. Because yes, we do. I even do that now as a teenager because I have more fights now, I think, as a teenagers as I did when they were little. So
see, Lindsay, it only gets better.
Right. Sorry. What I would do is separate them as much as I could be to be safe. Even if we were in the same room, I'm like, okay, you're sitting in this chair because you're older and you can sit in the chair. The younger one, we're sitting on the couch, or whoever is, more angry, or if whoever's not being safe is going to have more of my attention because they need to be safe than someone that's just laying on the floor crying because he, broke a crayon or whatever toddlers cry about because they cry about everything. So that's how I would handle those things. It doesn't work for everybody, but those are maybe some tips that you can use with the two of yours. Look at who needs the most attention right there, who's not being safe. And the other one, you can just, mom's right here. When you calm down, we'll talk, and deal with the one that's actually not being safe. If they're both just, if you just need to separate, put a little distance, put yourself in the middle and say, okay, we don't hit each other. We're going to sit here. Then that's how we're going to do the timeout. Whatever you got to do, it works. So we have 1 minute. Oh my goodness.
Lindsay, do you have any questions for us?
No, I actually, thank you. Some of the stuff I actually am already doing. So it's good to confirm that I'm actually doing something right. And Dawn has told me a lot of some of this stuff too. So
Dawn is excellent at that. She's excellent at like giving tips, and you may not feel it's working, but just keep trying. Keep doing it. It works. It just takes time.
Yep. And if you feel like, if you're like, nothing I'm doing is right, it's most likely not true. Most likely is right if you're being compassionate, empathetic, and also stern
and consistent.
You're right. It's just they're children and they aren't as smart as we are yet.
Again, thank you so much for putting this on. Even though I was the only person here, I appreciate it. And
thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks for joining, Lindsay.
Have a good fire drill. Hopefully everyone makes it out.
Thank you.
Bye.